Thank you, Ting, for your talk and for all of your practice. Are there any questions? Everybody in the room is looking at the screen. We want them to have questions. We don't have any questions. Everybody on the screen is looking at the speakers. We don't have any questions. So since we don't have any questions yet, I want to say something that happened in so the online Sangha has this 49-day heart kilche. So you're not actually sitting in a group, but at home you just take on extra practice. And so we had a halfway through ceremony, and people just reported. I had no idea. I thought it'd be like a ceremony with chanting and vows, but instead it was a circle talk, and people talked about how their extra practice was going. And it was very refreshing because a lot of people said, not going well. You know, it's like people didn't feel the need to put up a front. But Allie said something really wonderful. She said how when she's doing this practice by herself, she feels the support not just of the Sangha, but everyone who's ever practiced. And I sort of heard in that the support of the universe. And it was just, you know, all these Zen masters and you know, Judo Pope synonyms, you know, people who are fully authorized to teach, said all these long things, and I said something was longer than I wanted it to be. But Allie said this wonderful thing, which is that in our practice, we are supported not just by the Sangha as we think of it, but we are just completely supported. And I thought, you know, throughout time and space, we're being supported. We're being supported by all these beings that we don't even know about, all these beings that don't even know what practice is. And yet, that's what's supporting us. And so I want to thank you, Allie. So this morning, every time my mind wandered, I just sort of opened my peripheral vision and saw everyone in the room. You know, instead of staring at the floor, I became aware of everyone in the room. And I just remembered what Allie said. And then it's like, you know, you know, you have you can't see me, he's too far away. You have, you know, Siddhagarbha, Jujang Bosal, you know, his feet are on these lotus leaves. They look like, you know, fuzzy slippers, but he's being supported by these lotus leaves. And it's like that. We're just supported by the universe, which doesn't mean everything's going to go well necessarily, but still we are supported by the universe. We are not separate. And that was, I want to thank you so much for that. That was really wonderful. Yeah, it's really, you know, every time you have a circle talk like that, and it's the people in the Sangha who come out with the most profound things, not the teachers. It's the people, you know, doing the work who, you know, haven't gotten recognition for it, you know, in that level, and, you know, no one bows to them or anything, but that's always where the wisdom comes from. So thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, I felt the rest of us should just shut up. So are there any questions? Wisdom of the Sangha, speak.
I have a question.
Great.
You know, Ting brought up an interesting point of that we think helping is what we're supposed to do, and that's a good thing, you know, to help. Yet sometimes we can help too much, right? And go overboard on our helping. So what are your thoughts on that, of helping versus helping too much?
Yeah, if you think in terms of helping, I help you, then already you're not helping. So then you have I, you have you, and you have this action. Also, I help you, the person who's helping is sort of superior to the person who's being helped, you know? whether you think of it as morally superior or superior in health, you're healthy, you're helping someone who's sick, whatever it is, there's this kind of superiority. So we should help the way we do laundry. You just do the laundry. You don't, I don't think anyone goes around saying, I'm so wonderful, I'm doing the laundry. Maybe somebody does. But you're just doing the laundry. It's there to be done. So Zen Master Sungsan, he would say, what is your correct situation? What is your correct relationship, by which he meant relationship to the situation? And what is your correct action, the response to the situation? So there's no help in there. It's just what is right in front of you to be done. What is it right now to be done? So that mind, that's not a help mind. That's just a do it mind. We were talking, I forget with who, maybe Stan remembers, maybe he was there. I was talking with somebody about, we were talking about how when a crisis comes, we're just completely functional, and then as soon as the crisis is over, we fall apart. So forget about the falling apart. To be completely functional without the notion of help, without the notion of emergency, without any notion except just help, and not even help, just do it. So don't help, just do it. That's what's important. So not I help you, but just what is there to be done in that spirit. As I'm Jewish, and so I was very used to people trying to convert me to Christianity, and they really thought they were helping. They were helping keep me from going to hell, right? So I know very intimately what it's like to, when people really try to help, their idea of help, and not understanding, oh, this is the situation. This kind of help is not needed. Maybe another kind of help is needed, and not even help, but just what is there to be done. So that's very important. Okay? So thank you. Yeah, don't ever help anyone, just do it. That's what's important. Yeah,
So
I'll grab the microphone.
I would, no, when you say that, I mean, I know Christians who, that is just doing it for them.
I know, that's their idea.
No, it's not an idea. It's to them, it's gut. It's what they do.
So
They're
yes,
just doing it. They don't see it as a situation. It's what everything their life is that.
so what you're pointing to is the way that we constantly delude ourselves into thinking we know what the situation is.
But aren't we always deluding ourselves in every situation?
Yes, I said the way we always, I didn't say Christians, I said, people, evangelicals, I said the way we all do that.
Yeah.
We all are convinced that we know what's right. And that's what don't know is about. Don't know is recognizing, I don't know. I don't know anything. And then we just move forward, but with that knowledge that we shouldn't be so sure of ourselves all the time. And with that openness that we can take in new information, that we can see somebody else's point of view. Yeah, don't know is very powerful. I mean, what I just said kind of, trivialized it, but don't know is very, very powerful because we really don't know anything. And this is a very important thing to really digest, not just to understand up here, but to really digest that we don't know anything. Okay? So thank you.
And Judy,
Yeah?
I think just to take your point one step further, sounds to me what you're saying is that sometimes what we do is to do nothing. That there are situations, like perhaps with a loved one who is struggling with something, where we want to rescue them and we want to help them, that what we actually need to do is to do nothing and to that is the best way of doing something, is by doing nothing, if that makes sense.
Being present with them, listening to them, that's not doing nothing. That's much harder than telling somebody what to do, is having that openness that you listen and that you keep your advice to yourself. That's much harder. It's very easy to tell somebody to do a 12-step program, or tell somebody to go into rehab, or tell somebody what kind of doctor they need to see, or what kind of herbs they need to, take, or whatever. It's very easy to do that, but to actually sit there and listen and just be with somebody is very hard. And it's not doing nothing. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
A couple of weeks ago, I think Liz asked a question about, I think it was about home practice versus practicing at the center. And when like the conditions, I think how she presented it as the conditions didn't feel as ideal. And you said, you just practice where you are. I mean, that's, but when she asked that question, I think something that came up for me is when conditions don't seem ideal internally. Sometimes in practice, there's a lot of clarity and then I feel like, having practiced for a long time, sometimes there's more like a dry spell where there's not a lot of clarity, or there's not a lot of, obvious sort of confirmation that practice is, it's an overstatement to say that practice is working, but practice doesn't seem to be blossoming, or something like that. And I guess in my own experience, there's, even what you just said about don't know seems applicable. You just kind of go forward. But anyway, I just wanted to ask you about that. When internal conditions don't seem clear, and then and then also there's knowing when you need to make a change, and when you just have to sit in that lack of clarity, or that kind of dry spell in practice.
Yeah, this is a very interesting notion of a dry spell. There's no such thing. There's only your idea that this is a dry spell. So those times when we practice and we feel bored, or we feel angry, or we feel sad, or whatever, that's a great treasure, because it means you're seeing aspects of your mind that we usually hide from ourselves. So sitting there and you're not in samadhi, you're not in the Tushita heaven, that's a wonderful thing. You keep practicing through that, and eventually it changes. And then whatever happens, it changes again. Maybe you come out of that into months of bliss. That bliss won't last. So what you see how everything changes, including your mind. And you see that the shapes that your mind takes, and you don't let that stop you from practicing. So my teacher used to say, "You tell your backseat driver, shut up!" So that's your backseat driver. And you just don't pay attention to it. You just do your practice, whether it's mantra or a great question or breathing, whatever it is, you just bring your mind back to your practice. That's very important. Now, there's a small caveat. There's sometimes when people have a kind of mental crisis, then they really can't sit, because then their crisis takes over. And if that's somebody's situation where maybe they have schizophrenia, and suddenly their delusions take over, and they can't see what's in the room because they see all the things that in that case, stop practice, do something physical like bows or chanting. But for most of us, sitting practice is Just these things appear, and then they disappear, and something else appears and it disappears, and something else appears and it disappears, and you persevere through that. And that's a wonderful gift to do that. When I first started practicing at Cambridge Zen Center, and I've told this a million times, but I'll say it again, the building was, the back of the building was on a drop-off. So you entered on the first floor, but by the time you got to the Dharma room, the first floor was the second floor, because, the building went down. And I would always sit opposite a particular window. And I guess it was Wednesday night, they had like 2 sittings, but you didn't have to stay for both. And I always stayed for both, and I was the only one who stayed for both, except for the poor head Dharma teacher, who, if anyone stayed for both, they had to stay for both. So they were never happy to see me coming, because it meant that they'd have to stay for both sittings. And so I would sit there opposite this window, which at that point was, way above the ground, and I'd get so bored. I would get so bored. And I'd think to myself, I should have thought to myself, I can just walk out the door, or I don't have to stay for the sitting. But I didn't do that. Instead, what I thought to myself was, I want to punch out this window and jump out. That was crazy. Like, why should I try to break a window to jump out when I could have just walked out the door? But, this intense boredom would take over. And it would be awful. I would just be, if you've ever been intensely bored, it's one of the worst things to feel. And I sat through it. Something told me, you have to sit through this. You have to sit through this. And I did. And then eventually, it sort of, the stranglehold that it had began to loosen and loosen and loosen. And then after a while, it disappeared. So that experience of seeing these so-called negative emotions, whatever they are, nobody ever complains about feeling joy during practice, but that's the same problem. It's blinding you to everything outside your own emotional reality, right? But nobody ever complains about it because it feels really good, So, so that's a great gift of practice, is to just sit through all of these feelings that come up. And all these ideas that we have, just don't pay attention, just sit through it, return to your practice. Okay? Thank you. There's time for another question if there is one.
I wonder if you've ever heard of the concept of spiritual bypass. And
Yes, I have.
And if you could say something about this and how it may or may not relate to our practice.
Yeah, spiritual bypassing is, I'm so wonderful, I don't have these negative emotions. That's what spiritual bypassing is. And yeah, it's a real problem. It's a real problem. Yeah, you think you're supposed to have all this, bliss or joy or compassion. As Ting said, compassion is not what you feel, it's actually what you do, but you think you're supposed to feel a certain way. And so, you have these feelings, you're so wonderful, and you completely ignore all the damage that you're wreaking around you. Yeah. And you're in denial, and you can't admit to what you're feeling and what you're doing. Yeah, that's spiritual bypassing, and it's a big problem. And you see these like sort of spiritual teachers online, and they have these blissful smiles. I don't know, am I doing well? No, I'm not doing it well. But they have, I can't do it. I can't do it, I just can't do it. They have these, blissful smiles, and don't trust anybody like that. Just never trust anybody like that. Because, this idea that there's like a kind of state you're supposed to be in, and any other state is inadmissible, that's a big, big problem. One of the wonderful things about this morning's, circle talk on the online Sangha is people were really honest. I mean, one guy says, if I don't feel like practicing, I just don't practice, And nobody said, oh, that's terrible. You know, circle talk, you don't get to say anything. And then somebody else said, hey, I'm the same way. If I, you know, that's the worst thing you can admit to, right? I mean, better you eat puppies, you know? And so, you know, it was so honest. It was just really great. No spiritual bypassing there. Yeah. You know, so yeah, that's really important. Yeah, we have to fess up to all of it. And we also have to recognize that one is not better than another. You know, the test of our practice is what we actually do in this world, not how we feel about it, but what we actually do in this world and how we do it. That's the test, and it has nothing to do with, you know, if we're in a state of bliss or a state of misery. It has nothing to do with that. But then also to recognize that these states are temporary. So why hold on to them? Why pretend that you're perfect? Perfection never lasts anyway. So why pretend? Why do that? You know? So yeah, thank you very much for your question. It's nobody's spiritual bypass here, okay? Okay. Thank you. And now it's time to stop.